Hey everyone, thanks for joining us today. We hope that you enjoy today's sermon by our pastoral staff at Christpoint Church. We also want you to know that if you have any questions, prayer requests, or need information on any of our ministry opportunities, you can email us at info@christpoint.church. We love you and we are praying that this will be the best year yet. Welcome home.
The storehouse is what fed. So that is today the local church. If we're being fed by the local church, then that's the storehouse. So I'm going to tell you, it's not some charitable donation from a long way away. I'm going to give you a story. 15 years ago, I had someone call me, Pastor, we need to gather and pray because there's been a very terrible accident. Yes, absolutely. So wrote the name down. Yeah, okay, yeah. And be happy to. Yeah, I'll call some people. Well, I'm calling our town. This is a tragedy that's happened in our town. I'm calling the pastors. You're one of the first ones I thought of. Thank you for doing so. I've already called the televangelist. I've already called the mega churches that are on TV and on the radio. And this is exactly what went through my mind. You called those that are disconnected from you before you called the ones that were connected to you. And exactly, I'm going to tell you, this is what came out of my mouth in my truck, because I was in my truck when they called. This was what came out of my mouth. We have lost faith in the local assembly. Because we think because they're on YouTube, because they're on TV, because somebody well-known was at their church, they have more of a direct line to God than the local church does. Do not despise the day of small beginnings, which would be Sparta. And I remember thinking to myself, why do we put so much faith into something we don't know instead of something we do? And this person wasn't even connected with a church. And I'm thinking, that's because, I'll just jump back into this. These evangelistic things, they're not feeding. The storehouse. It's got to be the storehouse. See, we've got to be committed to what God has given us, and here's where we're committed, to our local assembly. So now, we talked about that. Let's talk about multiplication. So this is the title of the sermon. Let's talk about multiplication. Only what is given away has the ability to multiply. Only what's given away has the ability to multiply. I'm going to show you this. We live in a world of adding and subtracting. That's how we equate. See, the tithe is never a subtraction. See, we live by a system of numbers. Do you realize that you are controlled with your speed in your vehicle by 3 feet by 5 feet signs on the side of the road? And I'm not going to mention my wife. Do you realize that's a number system? Do you realize that you will accept or deny a job based upon the numbers? Yeah, I mean, if the numbers don't work out, you won't do it. See, the tithe should never be looked at as a subtraction. I think too many times we look at the tithe as a subtraction, because our lives are conditioned to add to our check registry and subtract from our check registry or your online banking, however you do it. See, we subtract what goes out and we add what comes in. So we have this mentality that we're subtracting when it never is subtracting, because it never did belong to us. See, we do that. What we realize what we earn gets put in, and what goes out gets deducted. We subtract what's taken out. Let me show you what this looks like. John chapter 12, verse 24. This is a perfect example of multiplication. Unless a grain of wheat, a kernel or a seed, falls into the earth and dies, it remains alone, but if it dies, it bears much fruit. So let me show you. This is the perfect example of multiplication. If we keep the seed, then we will subtract it from the stem, or from the ear, or from the pod. If we take the seed from where it was and we put it into our hand, we have subtracted it from there and added it to here. Do you realize all we will ever do is subtract one and add one? We'll never multiply. It will never have the ability to multiply. It will only ever be added to our hand, because our hand is not capable, ourselves are not capable of multiplication. All we can accomplish is addition and subtraction. But when we give the seed away and we put it into the ground, then it multiplies. Do you realize it doesn't just multiply and grow more plants? It grows one plant, and that one plant grows multiple seeds, and it's exponential, and it grows. God is the only one that has the ability to multiply our lives. See, when we give that seed away, and it's always conditional upon the ground. The ground, our lives, our hearts, our submission to the Lord depends on the fertility of the ground. Only what is given away has the power to multiply. Allow me to ask myself a question. Now, I'm going to talk amongst myself for a minute. And I want to ask myself a question. Please allow me to do that. And while I do that, I want to answer myself a question that I ask myself. So I'm going to ask myself a question. I want you just to participate and just pay attention. Number one is, as I ask myself this question, would I rather see my finances added or multiplied? I'm going to tell you my answer. I would rather see my finances multiplied. Because do you know that 4 plus 4 is 8, but 4 times 4 is 16? It's double. So you see the value in multiplication. I'm going to pick multiplication. It's not a very hard choice. Mark Batterson quotes. Mark Batterson, I gave some of you some books a few years back. Mark Batterson's author, pastor in Washington, D.C. Too many times he says we look at any situation and we do the math. We do the math. How many of us do the math? That's the first thing we do. Should we buy this? Do the math. Do you realize every one of you would be driving a $100,000, $300,000, $500,000 car, $1 million car if you didn't do the numbers first? We were out on a motorcycle a few weeks back. We passed a Bucati. I don't know if you know what that is. And I pointed at it, and I pulled over and told Kevin Birch, I said, is that a $1 million or a $2 million car? He said, I think it's more like $2 million. So I'm like, in Tennessee. But you know what? I'd be driving one of them if the math added up, because I think they're cool. So that's how easily it is for us to get off track if the math. So we look at every situation. Mark Batterson says, too many times we look at a situation and we do the math. And it just doesn't add up. God doesn't think in addition and subtraction like we do. He thinks in multiplication. So we look at a situation and we do the math, and if we can't subtract it and add it and figure it up, we won't do it. Luke chapter 9, verses 12 through 17. Perfect example. Let's look at it. Now the day began to wear away. Here's Jesus out. Everybody's gathered around him. Why would people not want to be gathered to Jesus? Why are they not gathered to Jesus today? Maybe we need to search ourselves and see if there's enough Jesus in us. Now the day began to wear away, and the 12 came and said to him, send the crowd away to go into the surrounding villages and countryside to bring lodging and get provisions, for we are here in a desolate place. But he said to them, you give them something to eat. Now we're going to break this down. Do you realize this is one of the only miracles recorded in all 4 Gospels? You give them something to eat. We have no more loaves. We have no more than 5 loaves and 2 fish, Lord, unless we are to go buy food for all of these people. Now, what are we supposed to do? For there were about 5,000 men. Now, they didn't count women, they didn't count children, they didn't count their donkeys. So most figures will put this at about 20,000 people. 20,000 people gathered around Jesus in an instant. Don't tell me he's not the Son of God. So, and he said to his disciples, have them sit down in groups of about 50 each. And they did so, and he had them all sit down, and taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, he looked up to heaven, and he said a blessing over them, and then he broke the loaves, and he gave them to the disciples, and they set before the crowd, and they all ate. There's that word all again. And they all ate, and they were all satisfied, and what was left over was picked up, and that was 12 baskets of broken pieces. Now notice with me. The disciples looked at the situation just like you and I would, and it didn't add up. I don't think we can do this. Do you? How many we go, oh, I'm counting. Oh, okay, just mess me up. I got to start again. So, this is what they're doing. I'm sorry, Jesus. It just don't add up. It's not adding up. They looked at the situation in subtraction and addition, and they couldn't make it work It just didn't add up. They thought in terms of addition and subtraction. They were willing to send the people away. We are built for fight or flight. So in other words, subtract the problem. If we have a problem, subtract the problem. So they hey, let's subtract the problem. There's too many. There's too many. So the addition doesn't work. We're too remote. We're just too far out. You realize the nearest McDonald's is like 6 mile walk away? And they'll be closed by the time we get there. Do you realize that we've got to do something and we don't have the resources to do it? We're too remote. We can't do this. This is what I love, is what Jesus says to them. He doesn't give them an explanation. In verse 13, they say, we got all these people, I don't know what we're going to do. They look at them, they're hungry, and they're going to be here all night, and we're going to be responsible for them, and we can't disappear like you do. And I don't know what we're going to do. Jesus says, you feed them. See, I love the fact that you feed them. You're not seeing in multiplication. You're seeing two-dimensionally. You've got to look, you got to look like Emmett Brown, man. You got to go. You got to go to the flux capacitor. You got to look into the depth of the future. So you got to look. So you got to go a little deeper here, guys. You're not going deep enough. Think multiplication. Notice, John, I want you to notice. Remember I said all 4 Gospels have this account. Notice what John says in chapter 6, verse 7. Philip answered him, 200 denarii worth of bread wouldn't even feed this crowd. A denarii was a day's wages. That was a day's wages. You realize he said 200 days' wages. Do you realize the average American, if you take off the weekends and their days off, if you take off the holidays and the days that they have up for vacation, do you realize the average American works 200 days a year? That's about the amount of work that they put in. Philip was saying a year's worth of wages wouldn't feed these people. We could literally bankrupt ourselves. It doesn't add up. We can't understand multiplication in the terms of Jesus, and neither could the disciples until we give the seed away. Once the seed is given away, then all of a sudden it starts to make sense. Andrew, always the bringer, and not recorded in Luke's gospel, but recorded. Andrew brings this little boy. Hey, I got a kid here, got 5 loaves. At least he thought. I got 5 loaves of 2 fish. What are you going to do with that, Lord? What are you going to do with that? You know what I'm kind of thinking? We could all, 12 of us, at least have 2 bites. Maybe we're not going to starve to death. So Jesus said, you feed them. Andrew brought what money couldn't buy. They were still thinking in addition and subtraction. They were about to learn about God's multiplication tables. Jesus took what they had. I want you to notice something with me. He's never going to ask you for more than what you have. He's never going to ask you to bring more than you have. He's never going to ask you to clean yourself up. He never asked that little boy to fix those fish, to clean those fish, and to make sure that bread didn't have mold on it. He never said that. He brought that little boy and said, look, this is what we have. And Jesus said, that's all I ever asked. I'm asking you to do the miraculous, but you brought all that you had, and that's enough. He blessed it first fruits. He broke it. And then he gave it to the disciples, and here's where we come in. Because we can't be Jesus, we don't understand how. But we can understand how to be servants and disciples. Here's where we come in. If the disciples, like us today, were to have taken their portion. Now, first of all, they've seen a miracle broken from that into 12 portions. They're like, wow, that's pretty cool. So they get each one of them a portion. If they had kept theirs and consumed it and added it to themselves, see, addition, they would have only ever possessed one small meal. And everybody else, they would have felt terrible because everybody else would have been licking their lips and looking at them. Only enough for themselves would they have ever had. Only enough. So they gave to the people. Jesus gave to them. They gave to the people, and something began to happen. Man, this ain't running out. Every time I give more, there is more. It's not running out. God multiplied it, and I want you to know how He multiplied it when they gave themselves away, when they gave their portion away, when they gave the seed to the ground, do you realize they went back and not only, if they'd have kept that, they would have had one small meal for themselves, but they were able to pick up one basket for each one of them for their entire families. So I want you to realize how God blesses us. See what he says, try me in this and see if it don't work. Now notice with me in verse 14. Jesus gave the disciples instructions to do what they could only understand at the time. Division. Divide the group into 50s. Divide the group. Well, I can do that. I can do that. I don't understand the fish. I don't understand the loaves. But I can divide the people. Hey, y'all. Hey. Divide up into 50s. Yeah. You start sitting down here. No, that's 49. You got to put one over here. Start dividing people up into 50s. So we can do that because that's division. I know how to do that. Remember, only what is given away can be multiplied. The boy had to give away his meal in order for the multiplication to begin. The disciples had to give away what was originally given to them in order for the multiplication to begin. And what about the groups of 50? Where do we get this 50 from? Matthew chapter 13, verse 8. Here's where I think that 50 came from. Other seed fell on good soil. See, the soil is the key. The seed was given away. Where it produced a crop of 160 and 30-fold was sown. So, notice something with me. God doesn't start with 30. We start with lower and go higher. We're a left to right kind of society. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1 is the most commonly used number in our system because it's the first. God starts backward than what we start. God starts with 100, then he goes down, depending on the soil, the fertility of the soil. Matthew chapter 13, verse 8, he says, he produced a crop 160 and 30-fold. God counts in multiplication, and he starts with the 100 because of the good soil. The soil is the attitude, it's the heart, and when the soil is right and the seed is given away, multiplication will take place. Groups of 50 multiplied times 100, Matthew chapter 13, verse 8, equals a crowd of 5,000 men. See how that just adds up? See how that just multiplies? Don't be alarmed by a sermon on giving, because Jesus is the only one who has the ability to bless your finances. Don't be alarmed by a sermon on giving, because we preach giving every single week right here. We want each one of us to give of our hearts to the Lord. If we don't do that first, the rest won't work. Here's one last thought. Deuteronomy chapter 15, verse 15. You shall remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt, and the Lord your God redeemed you. Why did Moses remind these people that they used to be slaves? Why did he concerning giving? Why did he remind them of this? See, because when we remember who we used to be, let's get this straight. When we remember who we used to be, our hearts are more grateful today. See, I don't know that I've ever really told too many people this. I was always 10 steps behind everyone in a classroom. And when I say 10 steps, I'm talking about I was always 10 steps behind the last person in the classroom. I couldn't figure out what was wrong with me. I never really even gave it a thought. I just couldn't keep up. I couldn't read like others. I couldn't comprehend like they could. I was always the slowest, if not one of the slowest, to finish anything that we were doing. A test or anything. Anything other than art or playground. I didn't say I was the dullest tack. I said I was the slowest reader. I was the slowest to comprehend. The last one to always get, everybody's outside playing, and I'm still trying to figure out, you talking about the distraction? I'm thinking about playing, so that's only getting worse on paper. I cultured a mentality of you're not good enough. I created that, and I cultured that, and I cultivated you're not good enough. I cultivated a mentality that no one will notice you because you can't really even complete sentences. You can dream big, they're not going to outdream you, but you'll never perform big. I told myself, and others have told me to my face, that you don't matter. See, I created this mentality Because I looked around and I added and I subtracted, and the numbers didn't work. I couldn't keep up. So I told myself, and like I said, others have told me this to my face, you don't matter. I went through an entire course of ministerial studies and graduated. Tina and I spent months in an that keyword internship program. We spent months studying. We spent months testing. We spent months growing and learning. We were meeting people. The only problem was it was an internship mentoring section. It's kind of like the last part where you do your practicals, where you do your substitute teaching. The only problem was the interns. This is just one of the stories. The internship, the mentoring portion, was supposed to be someone assigned to you from the start of that to the finish of that. They told you what to expect, how to do it. You reported them, you studied with them, you showed them your stuff. See, we never had that. Because the one that was assigned to us as a mentor didn't like us. And I'm not making that up. This guy didn't like us. And when I say he didn't like us, he told us, I don't care for you. I don't need you. I mean, he didn't like us, so we didn't have a mentor. So, once again, you don't matter. You don't matter because if you mattered, that would matter. So we were successful. We graduated. And the ceremony was on a Saturday, and here's where it is. Big, huge place at the university. And see, we didn't have a mentor, so we didn't know what to expect. So we show up, we get out of our car, and by this time, everybody's kind of in our class, everybody's like taking care of us because they realize that we're the kid that doesn't know what's going on. Hey, over here, we got to get in this line. Okay. So we get in this line. Here's the line you're supposed to be in. How did you know what line you're supposed to be in? Our mentors told us that are standing beside us. Okay, yeah, well, we don't have one of those. So we had this wonderful service and wonderful music and wonderful speakers, and we walked across the stage, and the chancellor, they gave us our certificates, our graduation certificates, and we shook hands and we got a picture made, and it was great. And we looked out at the people, and I knew no one. Thousands of people, I knew no one. And then I look around, we're done. They're all taking their pictures, just like on graduation night. We'll be doing this in a few weeks. Just like on graduation night, they're taking their pictures. We had no one to take pictures. No one was there with us but me and Tina because we didn't know. Was it that no one would have went? We didn't know. So once again, we didn't matter. So we got in our car while they were taking their pictures and went home. So during this time, I was elevated to the number 2 position in our church. The problem was, I was given a title. You're the new associate pastor. Yeah, good. Thank you. Absolutely. Oh, by the way, we're not going to say anything about it because I'm kind of thinking that some people may be a little bit upset by taking on a staff member. So we're just kind of ease into that. So it's kind of hard to be the number 2 person in charge at the church when no one knows you're the number 2 person in charge. We were pretty good underground success. Some of the powers that be will have to ease them into it. And in time, people began to call me Pastor Steve. In time. Once again, you don't matter. If you mattered, they would make a big deal out of it. But on the 3rd Sunday in September of 1988, I met Jesus. I was right back there. And the church was small, and there wasn't a lot of people there. Tina punched me, and I'm like, what? Well, do you think we need to give our hearts to the Lord? Sure. We came and we knelt right there. People gathered around us. We mattered. And we prayed. And the interim pastor at the time looked at me right in my eye, talked to me, and I mattered. But see, what mattered most was that to Jesus I mattered. I mattered to Jesus. So why do I give more than 10% tithe? Because I've never forgotten who made me feel like I mattered. Why have I given 30 plus years of my life to serving the Lord? Pretty much at the detriment of family. Why have I stayed the course when others didn't stay the course? Because like the Israelites that left Egypt, I never forgot what it was like to be a slave to you don't matter. I mattered to the one who mattered the most. And when we realize where we came from, then we can grab a hold real quickly of where we're going. When we realize where we've been forgiven from, then we can realize the slavery that we've come out of to get to the place of freedom. See, we've got to remember why we were there. And we've got to remember who has put us here. Why did I write a book? Because I want everybody to know it doesn't matter what happened there. All that matters is what's happening here. So you know what? Yes, this is a sermon on giving. Yes, this is a sermon that breaks down tithe and offering. This is a sermon that's about first fruits. This is a sermon about serving the Lord. But first of all, and most of all, this is a sermon about mattering and giving our hearts to the Lord. This is a sermon that says, look, you know who I used to be? I ain't that guy anymore. And believe me, people in your life will never accept that until they understand multiplication themselves. Do you realize I'm not who I used to be? Do you realize what God's multiplying in me now? That's why I don't look like I did. That's why I look different and act different. So, you matter to God. Give Him your loaves and fishes and watch Him multiply it. I promise you, you will not regret it. Stand with me. Hello again, and thank you for tuning in. I pray that today's sermon has spoken to your heart and has ministered to you well. We just want you to know that we have two locations, one at our Sparta campus, our main campus at Sparta on the square in Sparta, and our second campus is at Smithfield behind Ace Hardware. And we would love for you to call Christpoint Church your church home. And if you're viewing this and you can't get in to church and you feel like you want to be a part of the church, then you can always be a part of the church. Just drop us a note and let us know that you enjoy being on board with us. And if you'd like to give and be a part of the ministry, then you can do that by just sending a check to one of the locations at 614 Murphy Street, Smithfield, 13 Liberty Square in Sparta, and we'll get you on the road. We just love you so much, and you can download the Christpoint Church of Tennessee app and you can give online. So we are real people. We're living real lives, and we're serving a real God. And we just want to tell everyone, welcome home. We're so glad that you tuned in with us. Welcome home.